Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Urban Legends video. Well, I wanted to do this quick video here because apparently there's a very strange, bizarre, but ultimately welcome set of news when it comes to the world of comic books. And the reason I wanted to include it here in the Urban Legends side is because I've dedicated a small handful of videos to anything involving comic books. Like I've talked about Death Mate Red, which is one of my most popular videos on comic books. I've talked about the death of Superman. I've talked about NFL Super Pro. I've talked about other crazy legends within the world of comic books. So the views are there, so I thought to myself, why not? Why not just showcase this interesting set of news that just seems to have happened out of the blue? It's almost like it crept up very slowly, and then just like that, all of a sudden, it's big. And it has to do with this. Apparently, the speculator market, the one that happened in the early 90s and basically imploded, the comic book market then, it's happening all over again now in the comic book world. But interestingly enough, it's tied to both back issues and, in a weird way, trading cards as well. So let's go ahead and let's just quickly talk about that information here, and then that way we'll see if you're a comic book collector like me, in the sense that I love reading comic books as per se to investments. You may see this trend, and then let me know what your thoughts are on there. So here's essentially what happened. I got wind of this information from Mile High Comics. The owner there, Chuck, he's someone that I have followed his website and his newsletter for a good number of years. I'd say almost 10 years by now. It's almost like a yearly tradition where I love to purchase really cheap, we're talking dirt cheap, 75-cent comic book type stuff from his collection. His collection, in other words, that's his store's collection. He has pretty much the world's largest comic book collection anywhere, over 10 million issues, and he continues to just add more and more within his store because he's making purchases all year round. In fact, I love reading his newsletter that he sends out almost weekly because it showcases his trek throughout the United States to try to find people that are willing to sell, especially large volumes of comic books. He'll be able to happily take it from them for a good price probably, and then that way he can put it in his store and then make sure that his inventory stays very, very large. It's a great model when it comes to a business sense. If you haven't had a chance to check out Mile High Comics, I highly recommend it. I'll include a link below for his latest newsletter. And again, it caught wind there of the interesting thing associated with comic books. Somewhere out of the blue, it seems like all of a sudden back issues, we're talking back issues from the 90s, 2000s, and so on, they're selling pretty good. Like people want to read them. Not only that, but that's kind of almost bleeding into newer issues as well. Now, that's not saying that, let's say, the comic book stores' new issues are selling out everywhere. I'm not saying that, because if it was, it'd be much better news. In fact, it's always been like almost like a slow death when it comes to the comic book industry, even with comic book movies being the full rage right now in Hollywood. It has not transcended over to comic book store sales, especially the newer issues. But this is where things get so bizarre because, as just mentioned a minute ago, somehow, some way, back issues are the ones that are selling. It's pretty fascinating stuff because apparently, and this is again straight from Chuck, and then I was reading, I think there was an article on Bleeding Cool and another one on Comic Book Resources that stated that people are suddenly looking into having those back issues. Like they're enjoying them, they're purchasing them, they're trying to actively seek them as well. That's why Chuck stating at Mile High Comics, his orders have been through the roof when it comes to older comics, those comics that previously were just, you know, almost garbage bin stuff, the kind of stuff that you would see in the long bins underneath tables that never ever sell. Some of them still never will, but those are the ones that are getting a good number of interest. And it's almost like it's a speculative market. People are looking at it and trying to find the next hottest craze, maybe something else like a one-off feature, a cameo, an introduction, a one-shot, maybe it's a new series, a number one, something that never really took off but could have the chance to take off. That's the kind of stuff that's apparently happening all over again. Very reminiscent of the 90s. If you lived like me as a youngster during the 90s, you knew that was the same thing that was happening in the comic book world. There was absolutely a huge speculative market. You had people that were always purchasing issues, thinking it was going to turn into something just many times over the original price. And of course, stores were more than happy to provide as many of those issues as possible. And of course, the publishers themselves, Image, DC, Marvel, Dark Horse, Valiant, remember that one? They were there to just make sure that they could print as many as possible as well to meet that demand. Of course, as business sense states, if you have too much of something, how can it be valuable, right? And so it all imploded afterward. That's where those issues just basically became almost worthless. And now all of a sudden, it's almost like they're a big deal. I took a look too online through eBay, Amazon, and then also through Maha Comics to see, what the latest, I guess, value is, the latest dollar sense when it comes to some of the older issues. I like to use Alien 3, the movie adaptation, as a gamut, like his actual gauge when it comes to that stuff. And sure enough, it's actually at a higher price. It seems like people are trying to find it. If I had to guess also why, not just for a speculative purpose when it comes to back issues, it's this. Those back issues have not, for the most part, been available as new purchases, like let's say reissues, reprints, anything like that, and they haven't been available on the digital side as well. Obviously, stuff like Comixology and other digital platforms are allowing people to enjoy things through their iPad or through their Microsoft pad or through their computer or phone, but it's not going to have every single older issue. So it seems like people are really enjoying, I guess, youngsters that have now turned into adults. They're the ones that are enjoying that kind of stuff. They're enjoying the older issues, the crazy nostalgia that's associated with them, the way that they were drawn, which is a different style, the way they were written as well, which was also a different style. It's very nostalgic. I love having my little mini collection. I call it mini. If I had to guess, I probably have like 1,000 comic books within my collection. That's because I buy them dirt cheap. As I mentioned a little earlier in this video, buying a yearly tradition of really cheap comic books there from Mile High Comics and anything else I could find. Let's say whenever I go on my Comic-Con quests, those are the ones that fill up my collection. And it helps too whenever there's very good coupons or whenever you have sales like Chuck is having now with 50% off all back issues. You pretty much slash the price, and that really helps to fill on the cheap side anything involving comic books. So I love my mini collection, especially the older ones from the 90s. Good God, those comics are like corny now. I mean, they're filled with the cheese you would expect from 90s comic books, from the Buzz haircuts to the big muscles to the pouches to the cross hatches when it came to the inking, to everyone having the grimaced face as well. It was just amazing how that era even started, and then obviously ended up cutting away afterward. But yes, I absolutely loved going through them, so I get the sense of why there's this almost speculator craze. And as I mentioned a little earlier too, it may happen to be with trading cards. That's another weird phenomenon. Basketball cards, baseball cards, they're selling like hotcakes. They're the ones that people are just going crazy over. And it's also going into stuff like Pokemon, stuff like Yu-Gi-Oh! I don't even know if Magic the Gathering is still around. Somebody might have to help me on that. Or even Dungeons and Dragons and other type stuff. But they're selling. I see stories almost not weekly, but at least monthly, of stores that are no longer, public stores, in other words, like Walmart and Target, no longer selling these cards because of the craze that happened with them. Like, people were fighting for these cards. Can you believe that? They were actually fighting, and it's created a absolute market galore when it comes to like the sports cards, the baseball, the basketball, and so on, and unbelievable prices associated with them. Well, it seems like that has transcended send it over into comic book sales, specifically back issues. And it's just weird how that all happened out of the blue. And I was reading another article that was stating it could still be tied to the pandemic. People obviously, at least a year ago, were staying home. They were isolated. They needed something to be done. They needed something that, I guess, to pass the time. And then that's where they could order this stuff through the mail, all these beautiful, beautiful back issues. And then once they arrive, they could read them and enjoy that nostalgia. That seems to have fueled things as well. So on the one end, you have the casual person. That would be me, basically, which was, again, just a casual reader. I love the nostalgia. And on the other end, you have the speculators that are fueling more demand for the very same back issue. So it's a strange world. It's amazing how there's a full circle of things. I would have never thought that something like in the 90s would happen all over again today. Now, there's still not like, again, lines going out the door when it comes to comic book stores. As I mentioned at the very beginning, it's like, it's sad, but otherwise there's still slow death associated with them. But on the back issue side, definitely it hits the mark. So if you have any large collection and you want to sell them, it'll probably be a good time to do so now, because you could start getting a much better price as opposed to later on there. But anyways, just wanted to share this information, interesting stuff for my Urban Legends video here, again following the trend associated with what I was talking about on comic books over the years. So always happy to add one more section here. But if anyone has any more info on comic book sales, maybe firsthand, those of you that are comic book store owners or maybe frequent them and know about back issues and know the craze associated with them, let me know. I'm sure there's still going to be clearance bins that nobody's going to touch. 25-cent comics that'll still stay as is today, 5 years from now too. But I still want to see and hear if there's any other type of, I guess, information that anyone can provide from the front lines from anything involving those back issues. All right, everyone. Thanks again as always. Take care.